It's time to have some fun, to get in there inside of data frames and to pull out all that great information. So go to colab.research.google.com and open up a new notebook. Let's call this one DF Elements, okay? Suggesting that we are going to retrieve the elements inside of the data frame. Go ahead and copy the provided URL for the bike rentals dataset. And then I want you to go ahead and take the steps to load it to show the first 5 rows. We will do this every time that you access a data frame. Okay, so import pandas as PD. Do this along with me. Do it ahead of me. Hopefully you guys are getting this down. Then I want to define the data frame df equal to pd.read underscore CSV, the URL, and then I want to look at the first 5 rows. We've seen this one before, so it should have an expected output. And there we have it. Okay, we got some interesting info in here. Now let's go ahead and look at it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put comments on these to distinguish the different coding cells. So in this one, we basically load bike rentals dataset. Now what we're going to do is I want to access individual columns. Okay, so let's access the humidity column. Okay, so what's the syntax for that? Well, it's df bracket, and then look at this. This is great. When you do that, it actually is showing the names of the columns. Okay, really nice there. So if you have that, you can go and find it. You can say HUM. If you don't, well, it's not hard to write. Just put in quotes HUM. Now I'm going to press Shift Enter here. Okay, so we're accessing the column, but we're going to go ahead and run it. And you can see what it does. It shows the first 5 and the last 5 rows of the column. Okay, here's something interesting. When you have a column of information, you can do a lot with it. Okay, so for instance, last time we looked at .describe, which showed all the descriptive statistics for the column, for the data frame. Well, can you do this for individual columns? Let's experiment and find out. Show descriptive stats for hum column. Hum. Okay, df bracket HUM dot describe. Okay, with parentheses, and you do get it. Okay, so you can see it gives you the mean humidity. This is scaled. I always like to compare the mean and the median very close. Ooh, very close here. And again, that makes this data set very symmetric. And it also gives you the quartiles and the min and the max. So that's one cool thing you can do with individual columns. Okay. What else can you do with individual columns? Well, you can kind of like do the same thing that you do with the data frame per column, meaning how would you access like an individual element? Like, hey, we see just the first 5 rows and the last 5. What if I want to see the 500th row? Okay, how might we do that? Let's put that in there. So access 500th row of hum column. Okay, well, to start with, we need to access the column. Okay, showed you different ways to do this in the slides, but df.hum, and then, right, if you have it, it's basically an ordered list. You can then use another style of bracket notation, put in 500, press Shift Enter, and then you actually get it. Now, technically, that's index 500, so maybe it's the 500 first row, but you get the point. You can get the humidity of an individual row like that. Or is it the 499th row? Index 500 is the 499th row, right? Look, go back up here. If you look here, the 3rd row has index 2. See, I have to do this too sometimes, you guys. So this would be the 501st row has index 500. Okay. 501st. Pretty cool. Okay, we're going to be doing a lot with individual columns. Let's shift gears now to rows. Okay, so how would we access, say, the, I don't know, 200, pick, how about 314? I was going to say, let's pick an entry. No, 314th row of the data set. So df, I want to see, can I just put in 304? 314. Can I do that? I'm not sure. Doesn't work, darn it. I feel like it could. Well, the bracket notation is looking for like a column in quotes. But recall that if we use .iloc, index location, that should work. Okay, press Shift Enter. And there we have it. We have, note that it's instant 315. And we have the values for the 314th row. Okay. It's often helpful to look at some rows in the middle, like a chunk of them, right? So what I mean here is, you know, you can see the first 5 rows, the last 5. What about the middle? How can we access the middle? Well, let's try that. Access middle. Well, maybe at the middle, let's just say access rows 300 to 310. Okay, let's do that now. Maybe you know how to do that. Get in there and put it in. We got to start with df because that's how you get the data frame. And then if it's numeric, we want to use .iloc, index location. And we're just looking at rows. So if I start at the 300th and say in at the 310th. Press Shift Enter. And now look at this. You can see the indices labeled and it is the form of a data frame. Okay, if you're paying attention, you may be wondering, well, this looks nice, but when you do in one individual row, it's not as nice. It's not like a data frame. And this has to do with different types in pandas. These are different types. Now, from what we learned in Python, we should be able to determine the types here, right? This is type data frame, okay? But what is this? Let's find out. And we saw it before, right? Even up here. So it looks like it's like a column. It's the same type of a column. So let's try that. Okay. What is the type of a column? Okay. Put in the Python keyword type. So when you're doing pandas, well, see, we're doing data analytics in general. We're using pandas to be helpful, but this is all Python. So anything that works in Python is going to work here. So type is a global keyword in Python. So let's try type of df. And again, I could pick any column, pick C and T. That's, by the way, that's the number of bike rentals. That's the interesting one. Press Shift Enter. Pandas.core.series.series, okay? Just to show you comparison, what is the type of df? We'll type df pandas.core.frame.dataframe, right? So pandas has this way of doing things. Basically, columns, individual columns and rows are represented as series, and multiple ones are represented as columns, okay? I'm going to show you another piece, which is multiple columns. Can we access multiple columns by name? You better believe it, and it's very useful. Because you may have like 40 columns, and you're like, but I only want to use these 8. Okay, well, let's do an example here. Let's look at some ways that maybe we would consider limiting this data set to more useful columns. Okay, if I go back up to this subset, I can see, well, maybe I want, what do I want here? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer here, right? Like maybe I'm just interested in, I'm not interested in the days, the time, I'm just interested in the temperature and the humidity and the wind speed. Okay, maybe I don't want atemp either. You may be wondering, what the heck is the difference between atemp and temp? Well, the temperature, I think atemp is something like how it feels to you versus the actual temperature. So I'm just going to use temp, humidity, wind speed, and count. Okay, so here we go. df and then use the brackets. Now, inside of the brackets, you want to put the columns, okay? So I want you to think about this for just a second here. If you're putting columns inside of brackets, how should the columns be represented? Okay, if you have multiple columns and they're each strings, what's a way to represent multiple strings? It's a list. So you want a list inside of the brackets. Double brackets, it feels weird, but that's what you need. So I think there was hum. And by the way, the order that you put them in will be the order that it shows, which is also really cool. So you can actually reorder also your data frames using this. Humidity, temperature. Was there a wind? Let me count. And press Shift Enter and see what happens. If you spell something wrong, yeah, like wind, it's not an index, you're going to get an error. So no problem. I just go back up and look. I see it's wind speed. Okay, different. Yeah, like what does wind mean? Well, wind speed has a clear numeric meaning. All right, correct. Hopefully that'll correct it. And you can see now I have a truncated data frame. And it's, perhaps the one that I want. And because I didn't specify anything about the rows, they are all included. Now, the next step I want to do with you is show you how to reassign data frame to fewer columns. And the reason why I say that is simply because didn't store. Now you've noticed that I have been calling everything df, which is the norm for data frames. In some cases, however, you may want to work with multiple data frames. So df is not like that's all you can use. You can call it something else, right? If I'm going to have like one data frame, but then I'm using actually two, I can't call them both df. I can rewrite it, okay? If I know for sure, you know what? I'm not going back to the previous data frame. I know this is what I want going forward. You can call it df again. Probably like others, I've been caught in that sometimes. Oh, wait, but I want to go back. But it's so nice just to write df. So a lot of options here. Call it what you want. df, I don't know, you could call it df1 for like the next one, or you could call it something like df smaller, like for smaller. You could call it df trunk for df truncated. I'm just going to call it, you could even do a one like that. I'm going to use the Python. I like doing my data frames df underscore something. And so I'm just going to call this df calls. No, I don't like that. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure what to call it. Sometimes I call it df small, but it's smaller number of columns. Okay. df small, and then I'm going to go ahead and copy in that previous list. Okay. So what that's going to do is it's going to reassign, basically, I say reassign, but it's creating a new variable df small that only has those 4 columns. So now there will be a new variable called df small. We can go and look at the header of it. Okay, so let's do that. Press Shift Enter. And there you can see a nice little data frame. Now let's say I want to take it a step further. Let's say I want to shorten data frame to fewer rows, right? How might I do that? Like, let's just say first 200. Okay, well, we got to think about this. So to start with, by the way, you can reassign it. Df small equals df small, what's the change? Okay, df small what? Am I bracketing, .iloc, something else? Well, if it's the first 200 rows, I can do that using .iloc, index location. So I can put the 0 to 200 like that. It's going to take all the columns. Recall that when you do that, the 0, by default, if you don't put it there, it's assumed. You start at 0. So that should work. Push Shift Enter. Here's the interesting thing. How do you know if it worked? Oh no, like .head just shows the first 5 rows. Multiple ways, okay? I'm going to show you. Show last 5 rows. We haven't done that. If the head shows the first 5, what do you think it should be called to show the last 5? Head, first 5, last 5. What's the opposite of head? Tail. Isn't that cool? So there you see the last 5, and it does end up on 200. Another way, you can use the global Python function length. So you take length df small. You know, if you want to show 2, like don't you know what's the length of df by comparison? I'm just verifying length of df small. If I do that, Python's only going to show the last one. But if I can print them both out, right, we can also use the global print function and put length inside. So you can see that the original is 731 and the new one has 200. Okay, so there's an introduction to accessing, I guess, elements of data frame. More to come.